The frantic thumping from beneath my feet was a sound I will never forget, a desperate rhythm coming from my own basement. I shattered the heavy lock and found my husband, David, chained to a beam, pale, trembling, and utterly broken. He'd been trapped there for days. When I begged to know who could do this, he whispered, "Our daughter, Sarah, and the men she brought home." He said they were planning to. What he told me next shattered my entire world. Trust is a mirror, shattered by those you hold closest. Where are you joining me from today? Let me know in the comments. Let me rewind and explain how this horror began. My name is Eleanor, and I believed my family was secure. My daughter Sarah, 27, was my greatest pride, intelligent, driven, with a promising career in design. My husband David, 58, managed his own successful firm. We lived in a peaceful suburban home where everything felt safe. Then, 3 months back, Sarah introduced us to Leo. He was 24, his skin a canvas of ink, with a gaze that felt hollow. But Sarah was captivated, completely devoted to this man who had no employment, no vehicle, and seemingly no shame about living off my daughter's income. "Mom, you simply don't get him," she'd insist whenever I voiced worry. "Leo's had a difficult past. He requires someone who sees his potential." What Leo actually required, I thought to myself, was stable work and a serious wake-up call. But I remained quiet because challenging Sarah, when she was infatuated, felt like shouting into a hurricane. The initial warning sign appeared when David noted discovering Leo in his office, examining documents. He claimed to be searching for a writing instrument, David mentioned, looking concerned. But my filing cabinets were all ajar, and several work folders appeared disorganized. I should have listened to my husband's intuition. David possessed many qualities, but suspicion wasn't among them. If he sensed something was wrong, something was absolutely wrong. The second alert came when our neighbors, the Wilsons, mentioned spotting Leo circling our property at strange times, even when Sarah's vehicle was absent. "We assumed perhaps he was watching the house," Mrs. Wilson had commented. But it felt odd, him being outside near midnight peering through glass. Yet the most troubling signal was how Sarah began interacting with her father and me. Suddenly, we were barriers. Abruptly, every shared meal transformed into a conflict zone, where Leo remained quiet while Sarah justified his every shortcoming and criticized our every worry. "You two simply hate that I'm finally content," she'd retort. "Leo helps me feel truly awake in manners you could never grasp." The final ordinary discussion I shared with my daughter occurred 2 weeks before my work travel. I was departing for a multi-day industry event in Portland, and I inquired if she and Leo wished to watch the house, keep David company. The glance that passed between them should have served as another alert, but I was too concentrated on my approaching speech to notice the signals. "Actually, Mother," Sarah had stated, her tone oddly eager. "Leo and I were considering, this could be the ideal moment to astonish Dad with that cellar upgrade he's constantly discussed. David had spoken about completing the basement for ages. Convert it into a genuine hobby space." It appeared such a considerate action from Sarah, an olive branch following periods of strain. I should have understood my child better. Sarah had never demonstrated enthusiasm for building tasks, or delighting her father through physical work. But I felt so thankful they desired to perform something kind for David that I failed to ask the clear questions, like why Leo, who couldn't maintain basic employment, was suddenly eager about household improvements. Or why Sarah, who previously contacted a repair person to switch a bulb, was prepared to handle basement makeovers. Instead, I hugged them farewell, informed David to appreciate his surprise, and traveled to Portland, totally unaware of the snare my own child was creating. The event proved successful. I delivered my talk on creative business approaches to a full hall, answered queries from sector executives, and even received interest about a possible position in Chicago. For one amazing week, amazing indeed. I experienced being more than merely a suburban mother with a thriving profession. I felt influential, admired, invincible. I attempted phoning David multiple times during the week, but the calls went directly to message recording. I presumed he was occupied with work or the cellar endeavor. I left happy recordings about my presentation, about the lovely Portland climate, about how greatly I missed him and eagerly anticipated seeing what he and Sarah had achieved. In retrospect, the quiet should have frightened me. David consistently responded to my calls. Consistently. Through 25 years of marriage, I could tally on one hand the occasions he'd failed to answer my calls, and every instance possessed a valid explanation. This should have been instance 5. The journey home got postponed, changing my intended daytime return into a late-night arrival. I pulled my suitcase through the entrance at 2:53 a.m., weary but glad to be home. The residence was dark, which seemed ordinary given the time. I ascended the steps softly, hoping not to disturb David. Our sleeping room stood vacant. The bed was prepared, but it seemed it hadn't been used. David's side was completely flat, his cushion untouched. My initial notion was that he'd fallen asleep in his workshop, likely surrounded by the basement remodeling materials. I was genuinely grinning as I walked back down, picturing finding him asleep in a seat, encircled by strewn equipment and construction diagrams. I'd rouse him gently, learn all about the advancement they'd achieved, perhaps even view the surprise they'd been developing all week. That's when I detected it, faint but determined pounding emerging from underneath. The cellar entrance was secured with a sturdy padlock I'd never observed previously. The pounding originated right below my feet, feeble but continuous, like someone employing their final measures of power. My heart began racing as a dreadful comprehension washed over me. I seized a mallet from the kitchen utility drawer and destroyed that lock with a rage I didn't recognize I contained. What I discovered in that basement will torment me for my remaining days. David was fastened to a structural column, wearing the identical outfit I'd embraced him goodbye in a week earlier. His face was thin. His mouth dry, his eyes frantic with hopelessness. A pail in the edge revealed everything I needed to understand about the circumstances he'd been contained in. Oh heavens, David! I hurried to him, my fingers trembling as I attempted to release the restraints. What occurred? Who did this to you? His speech was scarcely audible. Your child and that partner of hers. They intended to. Intended to what? I pressed, ultimately liberating one of his arms. That's when David uttered the terms that transformed everything. They intended to inter me alive tomorrow. Create the appearance that I suffered a cardiac arrest while laboring in the basement. Sarah stated, she mentioned you'd never need to learn what truly transpired. I gazed at him, sure I'd misheard. That's inconceivable. Sarah would never. Eleanor, hear me. David seized my palms with what minimal power he retained. They've been arranging this for months. Leo's performed this previously. Your daughter, our daughter. She desires us deceased. Both of us. The term struck me like frozen liquid. Both of us. The life coverage plans, the home, all of it. But they required you absent initially. Required to create alibis. Eleanor, you're expected to perish in an automobile collision tomorrow evening when you return from your journey. My limbs collapsed. I dropped onto the cement ground, observing my spouse in incredulity. This had to represent some type of collapse, some injury caused suspicion. Sarah might be challenging recently, but homicide. My daughter was a design specialist, not a murderer. But as I scanned the basement, truly scanned, I noticed objects that made my blood chill. A newly excavated part of flooring, approximately 6 feet in length and 3 feet in width. Sacks of hydrated lime piled in the corner. Durable plastic sheets folded tidily on a table that certainly hadn't existed before my travel. They intended to bury you here, I murmured. David nodded feebly. Leo boasted about it. Mentioned he'd accomplished this 2 times before in different regions. Mentioned it was simpler than you'd assume to make someone vanish when their relatives were involved. I assisted David upstairs, my brain sprinting. Where were Sarah and Leo currently? Did they realize I was home prematurely? How long did we possess before they returned to complete what they'd initiated? As if interpreting my ideas, David gripped my arm. They're not anticipating you until tomorrow night. That provides us possibly 17 hours to determine what to do. What to do? I stared at him. We contact the authorities. We explain everything. David's chuckle was sharp. With what proof? My statement versus our child's. Leo's already considered that. He displayed me press cuttings about those other killings, Eleanor. In both situations, the families declared the absent individual had psychological problems, recall difficulties. The police never examined too thoroughly when mourning families supplied such thorough accounts. The components connected with terrifying clarity. The basement remodeling tale, it offers them an ideal purpose for you to be down there. And when they locate my corpse tomorrow, Sarah will inform everybody I'd been behaving oddly lately, losing memories, becoming disoriented. She'll claim I must have experienced a health crisis while working and struck my skull. The restraints, the padlock, all of it will vanish. Merely a sad incident in what was meant to become my fresh workshop. I stepped to the kitchen pane, looking out at our calm suburban road. Everything appeared so typical. The Wilsons' entry light was illuminated exactly as usual. The paper distribution truck was commencing its early morning routes. How could such wickedness exist in a location where youngsters still sketched jumping patterns on pathways? Where are they currently? I questioned. Leo possesses a flat elsewhere in the city. Sarah's been residing there all week, confirming their alibi. They inspect me every several hours simply to verify I'm still living, but not pleasantly. David's voice strengthened. Your child appears to relish observing me anguish. The female he depicted couldn't be my Sarah. Not the small girl who previously prepared me morning meals in bed on Mother's Day, or the adolescent who wept when she unintentionally crushed a moth. But then I recalled the shifts I'd witnessed in her recently. The detachment, the manner she watched David and me like we were hindrances rather than parents. We require confirmation, I stated finally. Something that will make the police pay attention. David labored to stand, still fragile but resolved. There could be something. Leo maintains a journal, records everything like it's some type of corporate strategy. He was displaying it to Sarah yesterday, boasting about how methodical he was. Where his flat? But Eleanor, we can't merely enter there. If they capture us, I observed my spouse, this decent man who'd been abused by our own child, and sensed something icy and lethal solidify in my core. For 27 years, I'd been Sarah's defender, her strongest ally, her shelter in each gale. Now I was going to ruin her. Then we'll need to guarantee they don't capture us, I said softly. Because somehow, I'm going to view that journal. David's healing was slower than I'd desired. Even following washing, nourishment, and relaxation, he moved like an elderly person rather than the lively 58-year-old I'd wed. Each instance he grimaced ascending steps, or fought to raise his coffee mug, my fury toward Sarah and Leo intensified. By midday we possessed a strategy. David would remain home, report unwell to his job, and sustain the image that he was fine. I would visit Leo's apartment building pretending to surprise Sarah with a premature return from my travel. But Eleanor, David cautioned, if that journal demonstrates what I suspect it does, we're not merely confronting one intended killing. We're confronting sequential murderers. I studied my image in the corridor glass, fixing my professional jacket. The woman staring back seemed businesslike, reliable, motherly. Nobody would doubt her of organizing an illegal entry. Then its occasion someone halted them. Leo resided in Parkview Flats, one of those buildings where residents ignored others' affairs and administration posed few inquiries. Perfect for someone with secrets to conceal. I stopped my car opposite the road and monitored the structure for 35 minutes, observing the protection cameras, the entry habits, the general movement of occupants. At 2:20 p.m., I spotted my chance. A senior woman wrestled with food bags at the primary door. I rushed to aid her, accompanying her indoors with a friendly grin and light discussion about the nice climate. Are you calling on someone, dear? She inquired as we awaited the lift. My daughter, I deceived smoothly. She's been feeling ill, so I believed I'd bring her some broth. The woman's face brightened. How caring. I wish her rapid recovery. Leo's apartment was 4C. I waited until the corridor was empty, then tapped gently. No response. I knocked again, somewhat louder, calling out in my most worried mother tone. Sarah, sweetheart, it's Mother. I arrived home early from Portland and wished to see how you are. Still nothing. I tested the doorknob, not truly anticipating it to function. It rotated. Leo evidently felt so protected in his illegal brilliance that he'd left his flat unsecured. Or perhaps he was simply that overconfident. Either way, I slid inside and rapidly locked the door behind me. The apartment was tinier than I'd predicted, with the type of bare provisional atmosphere that indicated someone prepared to vanish immediately. But what grabbed my focus instantly were the piles of journals on the sitting table. 3 coil-bound notebooks, each marked with a different identity and year. Patricia Chen, 2019. Robert Martinez, 2021. David Sullivan, 2023. My hands quivered as I opened David's journal. Sheet after sheet of precisely organized schemes. Sarah's employment timetable. David's everyday patterns. The optimal moments to reach our house unseen. Layouts of our basement. Even drawings of where they planned to conceal his body. But it was the earlier notebooks that made my blood turn cold. Patricia Chen, a 62-year-old widow in Phoenix whose stepdaughter had reported her missing in 2019. Robert Martinez, a separated dad of 2 in Denver, whose son alleged he'd escaped with a woman he encountered online. Leo had preserved everything. Images of the casualties before they died, specific sequences of the murders, even news articles about the probes. It resembled a serial killer's prize assembly, except Leo wasn't operating solo. Each journal contained pictures of various young women, different partners, different daughters and stepchildren who'd assisted Leo murder their own parents. I grabbed my mobile and began capturing pages as rapidly as I could. Identities, years, places, techniques, everything that could support police link these instances and stop Leo from locating his next partner. That's when I detected voices in the hallway. Recognizable voices. I still believe we should have delayed until tonight. Sarah was stating, what if she returns early? Calm, darling. Leo's voice was entertained, self-assured. Your mother's plane doesn't arrive until 7 p.m., and even if she comes directly home, that allows us ample time to tidy the disorder. The disorder? They were discussing David like he was refuse to be removed. I swiftly shut the journals, restoring them precisely as I'd discovered them, and searched around desperately for somewhere to conceal. The apartment was too tiny, too exposed. The sleeping room, too apparent. The washroom, they might require to use it. The storage, it was compact but deep, packed with garments that smelled like tobacco and fragrance. I compressed myself between Leo's leather coats, and held my air as the key turned in the lock. So, what's the schedule? Sarah asked as they entered. Straightforward. We visit your house at 3:30, handle your father, clean the basement. Tonight, when your mother arrives home, she finds his body and experiences a sad mishap on her route to seek assistance. And then, Leo's giggle made my flesh creep. Then, we wait for the insurance funds and prepare our next action. I'm considering somewhere tropical this time. Arizona, perhaps. Plenty of solitary widows in Arizona. I pushed my palm over my mouth to prevent making any noise. They were already planning their next target, their next daughter to enchant and control into murder. I can't believe I'm truly doing this, Sarah said, her voice quieter now. Experiencing doubts, Leo's tone became icy. No, absolutely not. It's simply he's my father, you understand, your father who never had faith in you. Your father who handles you like a kid. Your father who's blocking you from the existence you merit. I wanted to yell. David cherished Sarah. He'd worked additional hours for years to fund her university, cheered each advancement, praised her achievements to everyone who'd listen. How had Leo distorted that affection into something dark? You're correct, Sarah said finally. He never truly viewed me as a grown-up, and Mom's even worse, constantly attempting to shield me from forming my own selections. After today, darling, you'll never need to concern about anyone directing your existence again. They were silent for a moment, and I heard moving noises. Perhaps Leo collecting materials from somewhere in the apartment. What about the other families? Sarah asked suddenly. The ones in your journals. Did they ever discover what truly happened? Patricia's stepdaughter relocated to Texas with her inheritance. Never glanced back. Roberto's son purchased a home in Reno. Also never glanced back. Families are peculiar, Sarah. When someone dies and bequeaths cash behind, individuals aren't as keen to pose awkward queries as you may imagine. And if they did pose queries, then they'd experience mishaps, too. The informal manner he stated it, like conversing about the climate, made my blood freeze. How many individuals had Leo killed? How many families had he ruined? All right, Leo said finally. Moment to go conclude this. You prepared? I'm prepared. I waited until I was certain they'd departed, then slipped from the storage and instantly called David. They're arriving, I whispered urgently. Right now. They're arriving to kill you. Exit the house, I told David as I sprinted to my vehicle. Visit the police department, go anywhere. Simply exit immediately. What about the proof? The journals? I was already reversing from the parking spot, my fingers shaking on the steering wheel. I possess images, many of them. We have all we require. But I was mistaken. As I sped through suburban roads, ignoring stop signals and hoping no officers would halt me, I recognized we had photographs of journals that could disappear any time. We had David's account about being jailed, but no tangible evidence of the restraints or lock. We had my assertion that I'd witnessed burial arrangements in our basement, but those could be cleared in moments. What we lacked was verification that would stand in court against a sweet-faced design expert who would allege her traumatized father was having fantasies following a health incident. I called Detective Maria Rodriguez, a family acquaintance who'd attended secondary school with me. Maria, I require you to meet me at my residence immediately. It's a situation of survival. Eleanor, what's incorrect? My child is attempting to murder her father and me. I possess proof, but you need to witness it now before they eliminate it. There was a break. Eleanor, are you feeling all right? Perhaps you should visit the station, and we can. Maria, please. I realize how this sounds, but I'm pleading with you. Simply meet me at my house. If I'm mistaken, if I'm insane, then detain me for submitting a false alert. But if I'm right and you don't come, David will be deceased by tonight. Something in my voice must have persuaded her. I'm 12 minutes away. I drove into my driveway just as Leo's aged Toyota was exiting. Through the windscreen, I could view Sarah in the passenger seat, her face ashen but resolute. When she noticed me, her eyes expanded with alarm. Leo accelerated, screeching from the community. But I'd seen sufficient. They were fleeing, which implied they'd likely completed whatever they'd come to accomplish. I discovered David in our kitchen, very much alive, but clutching a bloodied kitchen cloth to his lower arm. What happened? They came to complete the task, he said gravely. But I was prepared for them. When Leo approached me with a needle, I resisted, managed to slice my arm on fractured glass, but I obtained the needle from him. He passed me a plastic pouch holding a needle filled with transparent fluid. Proof. Detective Rodriguez appeared just as David was describing how Sarah had stood guard while Leo tried to inject him with what they asserted was a swift and painless method to die. They became frightened when I resisted, David continued. Began disputing about whether to simply bludgeon me to death and create the appearance of a burglary. That's when Sarah saw you arriving and they fled. Maria heard our narrative with the trained doubt of a 22-year police professional. But when I displayed her the images from Leo's journals, her look altered entirely. These other casualties, she said, examining the pictures. Patricia Chen was one of our unresolved instances. We never located adequate proof to establish what occurred to her. Because her stepdaughter was aiding with the concealment, I clarified. Leo possesses a method. He locates young women with affluent parents, tempts them, persuades them that murder is the sole method to obtain what they deserve. And you believe your child? I know my daughter is planning to kill us both for the insurance funds. The query is, are you going to assist us halt her? Maria made several calls, sending teams to Leo's apartment and issuing a BOLO warning for Sarah and Leo. But I knew they were far gone. Leo was too seasoned to remain following a botched murder effort. What's the life coverage scenario? Maria asked. David and I swapped looks. 1.5 million each. I confessed we renewed our plans last year when David's company grew. And Sarah is the only recipient. We believed we were being accountable parents, ensuring she'd be provided for if anything occurred to us. Maria shook her head. Instead, you marked yourselves as targets. While Maria coordinated with other investigators, I found myself gazing at the basement entrance. I need to display you something additional. The basement was exactly as I'd left it after freeing David. The new excavation, the lime, the sheets, everything Leo needed for a rapid burial and body removal. Goodness. Maria exhaled. They truly were planning to inter him alive. The query is, what occurs now? I asked. They realize we're aware of them. They realize we possess evidence. What prevents them from vanishing and locating new targets? Maria's radio buzzed with an update from the unit examining Leo's apartment. Detective Rodriguez, apartment is vacant. Appears they emptied in a rush, but we discovered something intriguing. What? Additional journals. Appears they possess schemes for at minimum 5 more potential targets. All young women with wealthy parents. This man's been operating a murder enrollment service. I felt ill. How many other daughters had Leo poisoned against their parents? How many other families were in jeopardy right now? There's something additional, the officer proceeded. We discovered flight passes. 2 single-journey tickets to Cancun leaving tonight, at 10:23 p.m. Maria looked at her timepiece. It's 5:15 now. If we act rapidly, we can catch them at the airport. But I possessed a superior notion. A more lasting resolution to the Leo issue. Maria, what if they never reached the airport? She looked at me sharply. Eleanor, whatever you're considering. I am considering that Leo has killed at minimum 3 individuals, perhaps more. I am considering he's transformed my daughter into an accessory to attempted murder. And I'm considering the legal structure has an amusing manner of permitting individuals like Leo to evade consequences. You're discussing vigilante justice. I'm discussing safeguarding other families from what he did to mine. David placed his hand on my shoulder. Eleanor, I realize you're furious. I'm furious, too. But we must perform this the proper method. The proper method. The method that would place Leo in prison for possibly 8 years while my daughter served even less time for being a controlled accessory. The method that would permit Leo ultimately to exit and locate new targets. The method that prioritized lawful processes over justice. You're correct, I informed David, though I was already devising a different plan. We should definitely perform this the proper method. But as Maria coordinated the airport watch and David provided his formal statement, I was thinking about those flight passes, about how simple it would be to intercept 2 desperate escapees before they attained Mexico. Certain things were too vital to entrust to the legal structure. Maria's airport watch was a failure. Sarah and Leo never appeared for their flight, which meant they either possessed backup travel arrangements, or were hiding somewhere local until the attention diminished. Intelligent Funds says they're far gone, Maria told me over tea the next morning. Leo's performed this previously. He understands how to vanish. But I wasn't convinced Leo was gone. He'd invested excessive time and energy in Sarah to simply desert her. More significantly, he'd abandoned his valuable journals, his prizes. Men like Leo didn't abandon their prizes without a struggle. What if he's not escaping? I proposed. What if he's reorganizing? Reorganizing for what? Consider it. He spent months planning our deaths. $1.5 million in life coverage, a home valued at $350,000. David's company resources. That's not the type of reward someone like Leo abandons readily. Maria frowned. You believe he'll attempt again? I believe Leo's pride won't permit him to acknowledge loss. And I believe my daughter is in much greater danger than she comprehends. Over the following 3 days, I performed the part of thankful survivor. I gave discussions to local news channels about the significance of trusting your instincts when relatives begin acting unusually. I thanked the police department publicly for their swift reaction. I embraced David before cameras and spoke about how lucky we were to still be alive, but privately I was pursuing. Leo had committed one critical error in his hurry to escape our house. He dropped his mobile during struggling with David, and it had slipped beneath our kitchen counter. Maria's team had bagged it as proof, but not before I'd memorized his contact register. 11 identities, all women between 23 and 29, all with names like Ashley, Madison, Brittany, all potential accomplices or future targets. I commenced with Ashley Chen, Patricia Chen's stepdaughter from Phoenix. According to Leo's journals, Ashley had assisted him murder her stepmother in 2019. If Leo was following his typical design, he'd sustain contact with his successful accomplices. Ashley answered on the 4th ring. Hello, Ashley. This is Eleanor. I believe we need to converse. There was a lengthy pause. I don't know anyone by that identity. Certainly you do. I'm David's spouse. The man your partner Leo attempted to murder 3 days ago. The quiet extended so long I assumed she disconnected. Then in a voice barely above a murmur. He stated you were deceased. Well, I'm not. And unless you desire to join Leo in national prison, I propose we meet. 2 hours later, I sat across from Ashley Chen in a cafe in Central Phoenix. She was everything I'd anticipated Leo to be drawn to. Youthful, attractive, and bearing the type of emotional harm that made her susceptible to control. He informed me you and your husband perished in an auto wreck, she said, her palms quivering as she lifted her cup. He stated Sarah was shattered but managing it well. Leo deceives Ashley about everything, exactly like he deceived you about your stepmother. Her face collapsed. Patricia was never cruel to me. She attempted so hard to be a good stepmother after father died. But Leo, he made me perceive her differently. Made me believe she was attempting to steal my inheritance. Where is he currently? I don't know. He phoned 2 days ago requesting funds. Stated he and Sarah were in difficulty and required to vanish for a period. I informed him I couldn't assist him anymore. Wise female. But Ashley, I require you to comprehend something. Leo will return. Possibly not today, possibly not next month, but eventually he'll require something from you. And when that occurs, you need to contact me instantly. I handed her my card with both my mobile number and the direct line to Detective Rodriguez. He'll murder me if he discovers I conversed with you. He'll murder you regardless. Ultimately, men like Leo don't permit loose threads. The drive back from Phoenix provided me time to think. Leo was injured, running low on assets, and probably enraged at being outsmarted. That made him desperate, which made him hazardous in unexpected ways, but it also made him careless. When I arrived home, David was waiting with news. Detective Rodriguez called. They traced Leo's payment cards to a motel in Tucson. She's collaborating with local police for an arrest. Finally. What about Sarah? She's with him. Maria states they'll both be in custody by tonight. I should have experienced relief. Instead, I felt a strange void. 3 days of planning retribution, and it was concluding with a simple motel arrest. Leo would employ attorneys, allege Sarah was an unwilling target, probably obtain a lesser sentence in exchange for information about his other casualties. But occasionally the cosmos delivers its own justice. The call arrived at 11:45 that night. Detective Rodriguez, her voice weary but content. We obtained them. Leo's in custody. No release. Sarah's cooperating, alleging Leo manipulated her into everything. And do you trust her? I trust she's frightened and seeking an exit. Whether she was an eager participant or a target herself, that's for a court to decide. I disconnected and gazed out our sleeping room pane. Tomorrow, I'd visit Sarah in jail. I'd look into my daughter's eyes and attempt to comprehend how Leo had transformed her into a potential killer. I'd probably end up feeling sorry for her, perhaps even advocating for mercy. But tonight, I permitted myself to feel satisfied. Leo was captured. His journals would support authorities resolve cold instances across multiple regions. Other families would finally obtain answers about their missing loved ones. Is it concluded? David asked softly. It's concluded. Except it wasn't, because 3 weeks later, while Leo sat in regional jail awaiting trial, Ashley Chen's body was discovered in her Phoenix apartment, single gunshot to the head, execution manner. And according to the coroner, she'd been deceased for at minimum 4 days, which meant Leo had killed her before I'd ever met with her in that cafe, which meant someone else had been impersonating Ashley during our discussion. Someone who now knew exactly who I was and how much I'd discovered about Leo's operation. The realization that I'd been conversing with an imposter struck me like frozen water. If Ashley Chen had been deceased for days before our meeting, then whoever I'd met in Phoenix was part of Leo's network, someone who knew about the murders, the journals, the entire operation, someone who was still free. I called Detective Rodriguez instantly. Maria, we possess an issue. Eleanor, it's 1 a.m. What's Ashley Chen is deceased? Has been for days, which means the female I met with wasn't Ashley. The quiet on the other end informed me Maria was processing the consequences as rapidly as I was. Are you certain? Phoenix PD discovered her body in her apartment. Coroner states she died last Wednesday. I met with Ashley on Saturday. Goodness. That means Leo's organization is larger than we believed, and they know I'm investigating them. Within an hour, Maria was at our house with 2 other detectives and a security expert. Our phones were being watched. Our house was under observation, and David and I were officially under police security. The female you met with? Detective Miller asked, reviewing my account for the 3rd time. Depict her again. Mid-20s brunette, approximately 55. Anxious. Continued checking her mobile. Stated she resided in Phoenix, but her pronunciation sounded more Midwest. Any identifying characteristics? I shut my eyes, attempting to recall specifics. A minor mark on her right hand between her thumb and pointer finger, and she wore a golden necklace with what appeared to be initials. Did you notice what the initials were? MS, I think, or perhaps Mr. Maria, and Miller exchanged glances. Eleanor, we require you to examine some photos. They spread out images of young women, all roughly the identical age and build as the fake Ashley. But one face made my blood freeze. That's her. That's the female I met with. Her identity is Miranda Torres, Miller said gravely. She's Leo's genuine partner, not one of his targets, his equivalent. They've been collaborating for at minimum 4 years. The components connected with horrifying clarity. Leo wasn't merely a serial killer who seduced susceptible daughters. He was part of a team. Miranda would search potential targets while Leo handled the actual recruitment and murder. How many families have they ruined? I asked. We're still linking the points, but we think at minimum 12 families across 5 states, 12 families. That meant Miranda Torres was potentially more hazardous than Leo because she was the one who never dirtied her hands directly. She was the one who could vanish completely while Leo accepted the blame. Where is she currently? Unknown. But Eleanor, you've created an issue for their operation. You're the first planned target who survived and collected evidence. Miranda will desire to remove that threat. So what do we perform? We wait. We monitor communications. We track every lead, and we keep you secure until we can locate her. Waiting wasn't in my character. Over the next week, while David returned to work under police security, and I attempted to sustain some appearance of normal life, I was actually planning. Miranda Torres had committed a critical error in meeting with me. She'd revealed that Leo's organization was still active, still hunting. But more significantly, she'd shown me that they were concerned enough about my evidence to risk direct contact. That meant they required something from me. And individuals who require something can be controlled. I commenced with Leo's contact register, the one from his dropped phone. If Miranda was his partner, she'd be communicating with the identical network of accomplices and potential targets. I began calling every number, pretending as a community aid worker following up on family wellness instances. Most calls led nowhere. Incorrect numbers, disconnected lines, individuals who had no idea what I was discussing, but 3 calls received intriguing responses. I already informed the other woman, I don't require any assistance, said a young woman in Denver, the one who phoned last week inquiring about my stepfather. Other woman. Yeah. She stated she was from some type of target assistance collective for individuals handling challenging family connections, but something about her seemed strange. Miranda was still hunting, still searching for susceptible daughters with affluent parents. The second intriguing call was to a number registered to someone named Jennifer Walsh in Miami. But when I called, the woman who answered had a clearly different pronunciation than what I'd anticipate from someone living in Florida. Jennifer's not accessible, the woman said rapidly. Can I record a message? This is about the Family Advisory Services. Jennifer indicated interest in our initiative for adult kids handling inheritance disputes. Oh yes, she's quite interested. When can someone meet with her? I scheduled a meeting for the subsequent week knowing I'd discovered another member of Miranda's network, but the third call was the prize. The number was registered to a Michael Santos in Las Vegas. When I called, Miranda Torres answered the phone. Hello, this is Eleanor, I said sweetly. I believe we met in Phoenix last week to discuss Ashley Chen's circumstance. The quiet lasted so long I assumed the call had dropped. Miss, Miranda said finally, her voice ice cold. I was wondering when I'd hear from you again. I'm sure you were. Now, let's discuss what you truly desire. What I desire is for you to cease interfering with matters you don't comprehend. I comprehend perfectly. You and Leo have been murdering parents for their funds. You enroll their own kids to assist. And now you're worried I'm going to reveal your entire operation. You have no idea what you're confronting. Then why don't you clarify it to me? Face to face this time. No more concealing behind deceased women's identities. Another lengthy pause. Then you desire to meet. I desire to conclude this somehow. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. There's a storage region on the west side of the city near the former fabric plant. Arrive solo, and if I don't, then your husband dies. Your neighbors die. Anyone who's assisted you dies. This concludes tomorrow, Mississippi. The sole query is whether it concludes with just your death or much more. She disconnected. I sat observing my mobile, my heart racing. I'd just organized a meeting with a serial killer who'd already proven she could eliminate anyone she perceived as a threat. But I'd also just provided her exactly what she desired, an opportunity to conclude the issue permanently. The query was, did she realize I was providing her the chance to enter a trap? I didn't inform David about the meeting. I didn't inform Detective Rodriguez. I didn't inform anyone because what I was planning wasn't exactly lawful. Miranda Torres had killed at minimum 12 individuals, and was actively hunting for more targets. The legal structure would provide her attorneys, challenges, perhaps even a plea agreement in exchange for testimony about Leo's other crimes. She'd serve 15 years, exit in her 40s, and probably commence killing again. That wasn't acceptable. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, I stopped my car 3 blocks from the abandoned fabric plant and walked to the meeting location. I wore a transmitter that Detective Rodriguez didn't know about. One I'd bought from a private detective downtown. Whatever occurred in that storage, there would be a recording. The building was exactly what I'd anticipated from a serial killer's selection of meeting spot, remote, deteriorating, with multiple exits and ample space for disposing of bodies. Miranda had clearly performed this previously. I discovered her waiting in what previously was the primary factory floor, encircled by corroded equipment and fractured panes that cast bizarre shadows in the daytime illumination. "Miss," she said, not turning around. Prompt. "I appreciate that. Miranda Torres. Or is that even your genuine identity?" She laughed, finally facing me. In individual, she was smaller than I'd predicted, possibly 5 feet 3 inches, with the type of unmemorable face that would be ideal for her profession. My genuine identity isn't significant. What's significant is what occurs next. What occurs next is you inform me about the other targets, all of them, and then you surrender yourself. Or I publish everything I know about your operation, Leo's journals, the link to Ashley Chen's murder, the identities of your other accomplices. I've obtained adequate evidence to ruin your entire network. Miranda smiled. "Ms., I believe you're mistaken about who possesses the authority here." She extracted her mobile and displayed me a live video stream. David was in our kitchen preparing coffee, completely unaware that someone was filming him through our pain. "It would be so simple," Miranda continued. "A burglary turned violent. Your husband resists, gets murdered for his trouble. Very tragic. You're bluffing." "Am I?" She tapped her mobile, and I watched David answer his cell. "David, this is Miranda. I'm an acquaintance of your wife's. She's requested me to inform you that she's running behind, and you should await her in the kitchen." I could view David through the video stream, looking confused but obedient. He disconnected and returned to the kitchen, placing himself directly in the cameraman's line of sight. "One phone call," Miranda said. "That's all it requires." But I'd arrived prepared for this possibility. "Before you make that call, you might desire to verify the news." Miranda frowned, but opened a local news website on her mobile. The headline made her face become pale. Serial killer network revealed. Records connect local murder attempt to cold instances nationwide. I didn't await our meeting to release the evidence, I clarified. This morning's publication has a full expose about Leo's operation. Your image is on the front sheet as his suspected accomplice. By tonight, every police department in the nation will be searching for you. That's not even the finest part. I also contacted the FBI's Monetary Crimes Division about the insurance deception perspective. It turns out murdering individuals for their life coverage plans is a national offense. Even if you murdered David right now, you'd never be able to collect a cent without activating a national probe. Miranda's confident exterior was breaking. "You believe this concludes with Leo and me? We're part of something much larger. I'm relying on it because every individual you surrender is another life term off your eventual conviction." "There won't be a conviction. I'll be far gone before." "Where are you going to go, Miranda? Your face is everywhere in the news. Your fingerprints are in the structure now. Every boundary crossing, every airport, every bus terminal is going to possess your image." She gazed at me, probably calculating her remaining choices. Escape and spend the remainder of her life hiding or fight, and probably die in a gunfight with police. There is a third alternative, I said softly, which is you assist me locate the other targets. You provide me identities, places, evidence, everything you know about the families Leo targeted. In exchange, I'll suggest that prosecutors contemplate a collaboration arrangement. Why would you perform that? Because 12 families merit to know what occurred to their loved ones. And because you're more beneficial to them alive than deceased. Miranda was quiet for a lengthy moment, considering. Then she extracted her mobile again. But instead of calling her accomplice, observing David, she dialed 911. This is Miranda Torres. I'm wanted in association with multiple murders across 5 states. I'm prepared to surrender, but I'll only speak to FBI agent Sarah Chen, and I desire complete protection in exchange for everything I know about the organization. She looked at me while the operator confirmed her location. Agent Chen is Leo's target, Patricia Chen's niece. She's been pursuing us for 3 years. The components connected one final time. This wasn't merely about random serial killers or even organized crime. This was about something much more personal. Leo didn't merely kill Patricia Chen. I realized he killed a national agent's family. Patricia was FBI, retired but once FBI, always FBI. Sarah Chen has been tracking Leo's network as a personal objective since 2019, and you just handed yourself over to her. Miranda smiled grimly. Preferable a national prison than a shallow grave. Besides, Leo always stated the organization was too large to dismantle. We'll observe about that. As police sirens approached the storage, I realized I'd been mistaken about something critical. Miranda Torres wasn't merely Leo's partner, or even a fellow serial killer. She was an undercover national agent who'd been penetrating the murder network for years, and I'd just exposed her cover. You're FBI? I gazed at Miranda in shock as police vehicles encircled the storage. Agent Miranda Torres, Financial Crimes Division. I've been undercover for 2.5 years attempting to recognize the full scope of this murder network. My mind spun. But you attempted to meet with me in Phoenix. You threatened David. I was attempting to protect you. When you commenced digging into Leo's contacts, you placed yourself and every other undercover agent in danger. Meeting with you in Phoenix was my method of evaluating how much you knew, and whether we could trust you. Trust me. You allowed me to believe you were a serial killer because I required to know if you'd visit the press, compromise the investigation, or get yourself murdered by attempting to perform detective. The approaching sirens were becoming louder. Miranda rapidly extracted an FBI identification, and held it up as the initial officers entered the storage. National Agent, she called out. I require to speak with Detective Maria Rodriguez instantly. Within minutes the storage was full of local police, FBI agents, and crime scene specialists. I found myself sitting on a loading platform attempting to process what I'd discovered. Agent Sarah Chen appeared 35 minutes later. She was younger than I'd predicted, possibly mid-30s, with the type of intensity that originated from personal investment in a case. Miss, she said, sitting beside me. Agent Torres informs me you've been performing your own investigation. I was attempting to rescue my family. I comprehend. And you performed outstanding work. The journals you photographed provided us critical evidence we'd been lacking for years. Evidence of what exactly? Agent Chen extracted a tablet and displayed me a complex organizational diagram. The murder network isn't merely Leo and Miranda. It's at minimum 25 individuals across 10 states. They named themselves the Legacy Circle. The diagram displayed links between dozens of identities, with Leo's image at the core of one branch and several other images leading their own branches. Each branch leader, like Leo, recruits and trains accomplices, typically young women with family monetary issues. They supply them with fake identities, lawful papers, and most significantly, targets. Targets, wealthy parents and step-parents whose kids might be susceptible to control. The organization performs extensive research, monetary records, family dynamics, psychological profiles. By the time someone like Leo approaches a potential accomplice, they know exactly which emotional triggers to push. I examined the diagram more closely. How many individuals have they killed? We've confirmed 73 murders over the previous 7 years, but we think the genuine number is closer to 120. The scale was staggering. And Sarah, your daughter was recruited by Leo approximately 3 months ago. They'd been observing your family since last year, mapping your routines, David's company resources, your insurance plans. But why Sarah specifically? Agent Chen's look softened. Your daughter has been struggling monetarily. Education debts, card debt, and income that doesn't match her lifestyle expectations. The organization specifically aims young adults under monetary pressure, who possess parents with significant resources. So this was never about affection. Leo never cared about Sarah at all. Leo is a sociopath who views human beings as instruments. Your daughter was simply the most effective instrument for accessing your family's wealth. The realization struck me like a physical impact. Everything Sarah had stated about Leo making her feel alive, about discovering someone who comprehended her, had been carefully computed control. Where is she currently? Regional jail. Cooperating with our investigation. Your daughter is a target here, too. Leo employed advanced psychological control methods to convince her that murdering you and David was not only warranted, but essential for her survival. Will she be prosecuted? That relies on several elements. How much she knew about Leo's other crimes. Whether she took any independent actions to harm you or David. Her readiness to testify against other members of the organization. Agent Torres approached us, no longer performing the part of cold-blooded killer. Miss, I owe you an apology and a clarification. I'm listening. When you contacted Ashley Chen's number, you actually reached me. I'd been employing her identity to communicate with other cells in the organization. Your call informed me that someone outside law enforcement had connected Leo to Patricia Chen's murder. So you decided to test me. I decided to observe if you were attempting to assist, or if you might accidentally endanger years of investigative work. Your meeting with Ashley proved you were intelligent enough to be helpful and driven enough to be hazardous. Hazardous to whom? To yourself primarily, but also to other families the organization is currently targeting. When you commenced publishing evidence, you forced them to accelerate their schedule for several planned murders. Agent Chen displayed me more images on her tablet. 3 families in different states were supposed to die over the following 5 months. Thanks to your evidence, we were able to alert them and take the assigned killers into custody. So I assisted. You rescued at minimum 5 lives, but you also placed Agent Torres's cover at risk and nearly got yourself murdered in the process. I looked at Miranda Torres, this woman who terrified me for days. How long will it require to gather the entire network? We arrested 12 individuals yesterday. With Leo and Miranda's collaboration, we anticipate to arrest another 15 within the week. The organization's leadership framework is complex, but we've been mapping it for years. And the families who lost loved ones will finally obtain answers and justice. As the afternoon progressed, I provided detailed statements to multiple agents and detectives. I turned over all the evidence I'd collected, answered queries about Sarah's behavior designs, and supplied character references for David and myself. But the query that haunted me was what occurred next. Leo would spend the remainder of his life in national prison. The organization he'd worked for would be dismantled. Other families would obtain closure. And Sarah, my daughter, who'd been transformed into a potential killer by expert psychological control, Miss, Agent Chen said as we concluded. There's something additional you should know about your daughter. What? The night Leo attempted to inject David with that needle, Sarah called 911. I gazed at her. What? The call was disconnected before she could speak to anyone, but we possessed the recording. She dialed 911 and stated, I believe someone's going to get injured, before Leo seized the mobile from her. She was attempting to halt it. At the final minute, yes, Leo's control was powerful, but it wasn't complete. Some portion of your daughter was still attempting to rescue her father. For the initial time in weeks, I felt something other than rage when I considered Sarah. Perhaps there was hope for rebuilding our relationship after all. Perhaps some betrayals could be forgiven, if not forgotten. 3 days later, I sat in a sterile conference room at the regional jail, waiting to view Sarah for the initial time, since she'd attempted to assist Leo kill us. My palms were steady, but my heart was racing. When they brought her in, I barely recognized my daughter. She'd dropped weight. Her face was pale, and her eyes possessed the empty look of someone who'd witnessed excessive much. But when she noticed me, she broke down completely. Mother, I'm so regretful. I'm so regretful. I desired to remain furious. Part of me desired to make her suffer the manner David and I had suffered. But observing this broken young woman, I saw my little girl who previously crawled into my bed during thunderstorms. Inform me what occurred, Sarah. All of it. Through tears, she informed me about Leo's gradual control. How he'd commenced by hearing her complaints about funds, about feeling like David, and I didn't respect her independence. How he'd slowly convinced her that we were directing her existence, restraining her from her potential. He stated, "You two would never permit me to mature, never perceive me as a grown-up capable of forming my own selections." He made it sound like you were the opponents. And the murder scheme? Sarah's voice dropped to a murmur. He stated it would appear like a mishap. That father would simply fall asleep and not awaken, and you'd experience a swift auto-wreck returning from your travel. He guaranteed nobody would suffer, but you understood what you were performing, Sarah. You assisted him chain your father in that basement. I know. I know how awful it sounds, but Leo, he made everything appear so reasonable. He stated father would be all right for a few days, that we simply required him absent while we prepared the accident location. He stated, you'd never even know father had suffered. And when did you recognize it was incorrect? Sarah cleaned her eyes, leaving makeup streaks on her cheeks. When I observed father's face in that basement. When I recognized how terrified he was. Leo had informed me father would be unconscious for most of it. But he was conscious and he was pleading with me to assist him. But you didn't assist him. I was frightened of Leo by then. He'd commenced becoming aggressive when I questioned anything. He struck me once that week when I inquired if we were certain about the scheme. I felt a familiar surge of protective fury. He struck you. That's when I recognized I'd made a dreadful error, but I didn't know how to escape it. Leo stated if I withdrew, he'd inform everybody I'd been the one planning everything. He possessed recordings of me agreeing to the scheme, images of me aiding with the basement preparations. So you were trapped until that final night when Leo actually extracted that needle. When I observed him moving toward father with it, I couldn't permit it to occur. I attempted to call 911, but Leo heard me and grabbed the mobile. Agent Chen informed me about the call. You conversed with the FBI. I clarified about the investigation, about Leo's link to other murders, about the organization that had been employing young individuals like her to kill their own parents. There were others. Sarah looked horrified. Leo informed me we were simply resolving our specific family issue. Leo informed you numerous things that weren't accurate. We sat in quiet for several minutes. Then Sarah asked the query I'd been dreading. Do you believe you can ever pardon me? I don't know. I answered truthfully. What you performed, what you plan to perform. It's going to require time for me to process, for David to process. Is father all right? Truly all right? Physically, yes. Emotionally, he's struggling. It's challenging to trust anyone when your own child has attempted to kill you. Fresh tears commenced down Sarah's face. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Not everything, but near to it. What occurs now? To me, I imply that relies partly on you. The prosecutor is providing a plea agreement if you testify against Leo and supply information about any other organization members you might have encountered. I'll perform it. I'll testify against anyone you desire. It also relies on David whether he's willing to support leniency in exchange for your collaboration. And you? What do you desire to occur to me? I examined my daughter's face, searching for signals of the control and coldness I'd observed when she was with Leo. Instead, I saw genuine remorse and terror about her future. I desire you to obtain assistance, genuine psychological assistance, to comprehend how you permitted someone to convince you to murder your own parents. I desire you to accept accountability for your selections. Even if Leo influenced them, and eventually, if you're willing to perform the work, I desire to discover a method back to being a family. You'd truly provide me another opportunity. You're my daughter. That doesn't excuse what you performed, but it also doesn't simply vanish. When I left the jail that afternoon, I felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. Sarah wasn't the identical individual Leo had transformed her into. The control was genuine. The psychological harm was genuine, but so was her remorse. David was waiting for me at home with news. Agent Chen called. Leo pleaded responsible to all accusations in exchange for life in prison instead of the death penalty. He's also supplying identities and places for the entire organization. What about Sarah? Murder accusations decreased to conspiracy and deception. If she testifies and finishes a psychological recovery program, she could be released in 2 to 4 years. And how do you experience about that? David was quiet for a lengthy time. I experience like our daughter was a target, too. A target who almost became a killer, but still a target. If she's willing to obtain assistance, if she's willing to accept accountability, perhaps we can discover our method back. That night, as we sat on our rear balcony observing the sundown, David asked me something that had been troubling him. Do you believe we failed as parents? Made Sarah susceptible to someone like Leo? I believe we performed the finest we could with what we knew at the time. And I believe Leo was an authority at locating and exploiting vulnerabilities that every young adult possesses. But perhaps if we'd been more attentive to her monetary stress, more supportive of her independence. Perhaps. Or perhaps Leo would have discovered different vulnerabilities to exploit. We can't alter what occurred. David, we can only decide how we advance. 2 weeks later, we attended Leo's sentencing. He displayed no remorse. No emotion as the judge sentenced him to life in prison without chance of parole. But when Sarah took the witness platform to testify about his control methods, I saw something I hadn't anticipated. I saw my daughter resisting. 6 months after Leo's sentencing, David and I sat in a family therapy session with Sarah, who was finishing her court-ordered psychological recovery. She'd been released on supervision the previous month, and this was our initial attempt at structured reconciliation. Sarah, the therapist said gently, can you inform your parents what you've discovered about Leo's control methods? My daughter looked older than her 27 years, more serious, but also clearer somehow. Leo employed what's named guided radicalization. He commenced by validating my existing frustrations. Fun stress, feeling like my parents didn't respect my independence. Then he progressively intensified those frustrations into resentments, and eventually into justifications for severe action. And how do you experience about your parents currently? Grateful, ashamed, hopeful. Sarah looked directly at David and me. I comprehend now that everything Leo informed me about you two was created to separate me from my support structure. You weren't attempting to control me. You were attempting to protect me. And I almost ruined that protection permanently. David leaned forward. Sarah, I require you to comprehend something. What occurred in that basement? The fear I experienced. That's going to require time for me to process, but I also require you to know that I adore you, and I desire to discover a method back to trusting you. I know I must earn that trust back, perhaps for the remainder of my existence. Perhaps, I said, but you're willing to perform the work, and that matters. After the session, the 3 of us went to lunch together. It was awkward, cautious, but it was a commencement. Sarah informed us about her new position at a nonprofit assisting other families impacted by monetary fraud. She discovered purpose in employing her experience to prevent others from falling target to similar control. The FBI requested me to consult on their training resources, she said. Assist them comprehend how someone like Leo can transform family affection into a weapon. Are you comfortable with that? David asked. I believe it's significant. There are other organizations like Leo still functioning. If my story can assist identify and halt them, then perhaps something positive can originate from all this. Over the subsequent months, our family slowly commenced to heal. Sarah attended therapy twice a week, finished her community service, and progressively rebuilt relationships with her former friends who'd been concerned about Leo from the commencement. David and I went to couples counseling to process our own trauma from the experience. We discussed trust, about how to recognize control, about what we discovered about ourselves and each other. I continue thinking about how near we came to losing everything, David said during one session. Not simply our lives but our family, our sense of security in the world. But we didn't lose everything. I reminded him, we lost some things. Innocence, perhaps a certain type of trust, but we also gained things. Strength, appreciation for each other, comprehension about how much our family truly means to us. A year after Leo's arrest, Agent Chin contacted us with an update on the investigation. The legacy circle had been completely dismantled. 42 individuals were convicted in association with the organization, and over 90 murders had been resolved across 12 states. Your evidence was critical, she informed us. Those journal photographs led us to witnesses and accomplices we never would have discovered otherwise. What about the families? The ones who lost individuals, finally obtaining closure, and in some instances recovering resources that had been stolen. Leo's organization had been systematically plundering their targets' estates for years. 2 years after the basement incident, Sarah graduated from her psychological recovery program with honors. The judge officially ended her supervision, and she was legally free to rebuild her existence however she selected. She selected to remain near home. I spent so much time escaping from family, believing independence meant rejecting everyone who cared about me, she clarified over dinner at our house. I don't desire to commit that error again. David reached across the table and took her hand. You'll always be our daughter. Regardless of what occurred, regardless of what selections you made, that never alters. I know that now. I simply wish I'd known it previously. That night, as David and I cleaned after dinner, I reflected on everything we'd been through. The terror, the betrayal, the slow procedure of forgiveness and healing. Do you ever regret not having Leo murdered instead of arrested? David asked suddenly. I considered the query seriously. Occasionally when I consider the families he ruined, about how near he came to ruining ours, but then I recall that killing him wouldn't have halted the organization. It wouldn't have rescued those other potential targets. It wouldn't have provided Sarah the opportunity to return to us. So justice was more significant than retribution. Justice provided us back our daughter. Retribution would have simply made us killers, too. 3 years later, I published a book about our experience. The Basement, How One Family Survived a Murder Plot, became a bestseller, and assisted law enforcement agencies nationwide recognize the signals of inheritance-based murder conspiracies. Sarah wrote the conclusion, my mother rescued my existence twice, she wrote. Once by discovering the reality about Leo's scheme, and once by selecting forgiveness over retribution. She provided me the opportunity to become the individual I was meant to be instead of the killer Leo attempted to transform me into. Not every family obtains that second opportunity. I'm thankful every day that mine did. Leo died in national prison 15 months later, stabbed by another prisoner who'd lost his own family to a similar inheritance murder scheme. I felt no satisfaction in his death, only relief that he could never harm another family. Miranda Torres left the FBI and currently works as a consultant assisting families recognize the signals of monetary control and inheritance fraud. She sends us a holiday card every year thanking us for our unintentional assistance in bringing down the most advanced murder network in modern American history. And Sarah is engaged to a community worker she encountered through her nonprofit work. Someone who knew her entire story before he fell in love with her. Who comprehends both her capacity for being controlled and her strength in resisting back from it. Their wedding is next month. David will walk her down the path, and I'll probably weep through the entire ceremony. But they'll be tears of joy this time. Tears for a family that refused to permit evil ruin what we'd constructed together. Tears for a daughter who discovered her method back from the darkness. Some stories conclude with retribution. Some conclude with justice. Ours concluded with affection. Because occasionally affection truly is stronger than betrayal. And occasionally the most powerful thing you can perform to defeat evil is to refuse to permit it transform you into something you're not. Leo desired to ruin our family. Instead, he instructed us how valuable that family truly was. And in the conclusion, that made us stronger than any control could ever make us weak. The darkest nights create the brightest dawns. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought. Your engagement helps share these important stories with others who might need to hear them. Have you ever faced a betrayal that tested your capacity to forgive? Share your experiences in the comments below.